Both the Federal Transport Minister Peter Morris and the State Minister for Transport Barry Unsworth announced the decision that Carrington Slipways was a successful tenderer for the $2 million contract. The new ferries will be built on a smaller scale to those built last year for Sydney Harbour and will be constructed of steel instead of aluminium. They'll be 18.6 metres long compared to Sydney's 23 metres and will only be single deck. According to Carrington's General Manager John Laverack, the construction will start on the two twin-hulled vessels within the next few months and should be in service by the end of 1986, replacing the existing timber ones. Mr Laverack said his company had already built 5 ferries for the Sydney Harbour and another 4 were now under construction. He was, he said, delighted with the news, which would mean a continuation of the current work program for Carrington further into 1986.
From the outside, it all looks like nothing has happened. But go to the back door and you'll get the surprise of your life. Kylie Gleason did as she woke up this morning.
Oh, I was just about to walk through there and I stopped to watch the cartoons in my bedroom, and I'm glad I did now, or I would have been underneath all this mess. And I just stopped and then the car come through my window.
How far away from you was it?
Not very far.
You think you're a lucky girl this morning?
Yeah.
Just got to wake up, isn't it? Just thought I'd drop in, saw your light on.
The driver was 75-year-old Neville Wynne. Police say the man got his foot stuck on the accelerator while parking in the road above. The car hit 2 others and ran down the slope before landing in the back room of the house. Mr Wynne was taken to Royal Newcastle Hospital for observation, but was not badly hurt. This morning, the car, a 6-month-old Toyota Corona, was reached from its resting place.
Dr McLaughlin was the first anaesthetist to set up private practice in Newcastle 30 years ago. He's worked in the public and private systems since that time, and he says he hates the stand he's been forced to take, but he's had enough.
What kind of hours are you working?
Well, we normally work 12 to 14 hour day, and then if you have to get up at night time and do emergency work, and the last night I was out all night. I had about an hour and a half at home, and then you have to do next day, you do another full day's work, and it's virtually impossible.
He says most anaesthetists aren't keen to return to Wallsend Hospital because they know that its status will change in 3 years when Rankin Park Teaching Hospital opens. At the Martin, he says the workload is simply too heavy, even now when only emergency surgery is performed. According to Dr McLaughlin, this is because the health departments won't spend money to employ another staff specialist.
The burden is much greater than it was before, because the Mater Hospital is now the referral hospital for the whole of the district for the difficult obstetric cases and for the neonates. And of the 2,000 odd cases done a year in the Mater Hospital, 1,500 are now very difficult obstetric cases, which require more epidurals and they require a greater caesarean rate. And therefore this requires us to get out of bed a lot more at night time, and without help you can't really go on and do a full day the next day.
In a public address at the Royal Newcastle Hospital, Joan Sims, Director of the Office of Aged Services, explained its role and the work that's been done since its inception in October 1983. One of the first initiatives was to conduct regional search conferences to identify problems in each region and devise policy. Joan Sims explains the concerns expressed in the Hunter region.
While all the regions were concerned primarily with accommodation, transport and health, which I guess in some ways are predictable, on the other hand we did pick up individual differences, and in the Hunter there was concern particularly about transport. Ambulance services came to the fore. They were concerned about availability of information. It seemed as though there wasn't a total understanding of all that could be available, and they didn't know where perhaps to go to start to find out. But on the whole, elderly people were saying they want to remain as part of the community, they don't want to be isolated, they see themselves as contributing. Just because they've retired, that doesn't end their days of being part of the community.
The Office of Aged Services plans to conduct further regional surveys, but first it intends to concentrate on the elderly in ethnic and Aboriginal groups.
Wine judges spent yesterday and today in the Singleton Army Camp Theatre tasting hundreds of wines. The event is run by a committee of local wine industry members to give vignerons of the Hunter, Mudgee, Cowra and Inverell areas a chance to compare their products. When the show was first organised in 1972, it attracted 75 entries. This year there are 900 entries in 19 classes. This is the first exhibition of Australia's wine show year, and the standard of the wines affects the hunter's reputation. According to the judges, this year's standard is very high.
We've been quite excited about the 1985 vintage wines, some very excellent red wines, which reflects a very good vintage for red wine. Weather conditions were good, dry, good temperatures, and it shows up in the wines. Very happy about them. Some very nice elegant white wines also from 1985.
Trophies for the winning wines will be presented at a dinner on the Rothbury Estate Vineyard tomorrow night.
One thing is almost certain, the Black Diamonds won't have it as easy as they did in last Saturday's semi against Central West, who they trounced by 109 points. Their opposition on Sunday, Central Coast, in recent seasons has always provided Newcastle with strong competition. Central Coast last weekend also had a mammoth win by 99 points in their semi against South Coast. Sunday's State Country final then could be billed correctly as the battle of the heavyweights of the New South Wales country football. I spoke to Black Diamonds ruckman, 24-year-old Peter Kenny. Peter, you played in last year's winning side. How much stronger do you think this year's side is than last year's?
Well, the side's got the same nucleus as last year's side. We've had 5 or 6 new players come into the side, and they've had a lot more speed and just brought the standard of last year's side up that bit further.
Does it disappoint you that last week's game wasn't a hard one and you may have a mental approach problem going into this weekend's final?
It probably would have been better to have a closer game or a more hard-fought game, but I think the side can get its mental attitude back and be ready for a harder game against Central Coast at the SCG.
His teammate, 24-year-old centre man Gary Tanner, captained the Black Diamonds in this season's big win over Sydney Association. He's determined to see Newcastle go through its representative commitments undefeated.
Well, Newcastle's got a lot to hang on this year. This will be the third year in succession that we've won the grand final of the country championships, and I think it means a lot for us. We don't want to lose it. We'll be bringing it back for Newcastle for sure.
For the second time in just 3 years, the Warners Bay Bowling Club ladies had the honour to gather for the unfurling of a #1 state pennant. The team won the pennant in April in Sydney, beating Roselands. Earlier, Warners Bay had defeated Gosford City to win the country title. Today, along with Warners Bay Club members, ladies from Roselands and Gosford also witnessed the unfurling of the state #1 pennant by State President Dot Johnson. District President Joan McCall also attended the occasion. The Warners Bay ladies received their badges, and adding to their credit was the fact that this was the same team that won the last #1 award.
Last night, the Newcastle Kern Falcons probably registered their most significant victory in this year's national title. Geelong, despite their 5th placing, are regarded throughout the nation as one of the very best, with the likes of James Crawford, Wayne McDaniels and internationals Brad Dalton and Danny Morsu. But in a word, the Falcons were magnificent. They can't play any better than they did in the second quarter, with the charge led superbly by Ian Davies, who is an even better player now than he has been in the past.
Brad Dalton, is it? Yes, Brad Dalton.
Davies at times was freakish, but to a man the Falcons were hot to trot and tore the much-vaunted Cats to pieces. As we see by the quarter-to-quarter scores, the Falcons had it wrapped up by half-time. If they can keep this hot and play as well in the finals, they can destroy any team in it.
The Newcastle Police Citizens Youth Club Brass Band is flying to Geneva this Saturday, where they'll compete in the World Youth Music Festival. 14 countries are taking part in the competition, after which the band will travel to the town of Villers before attending a second music festival in Zurich. At this major competition, the band is required to present contest items over 7 days. The young musicians, aged between 11 and 19, have prepared 40 pieces and 10 Australian marches. Band organiser Dora Sim ranks their chances of success highly.
Well, I think they should do very well. At the moment, they're getting a very good sound and playing very well. And of course, they're enthusiastic. And I think this goes a long way to them doing very well.
Major beneficiaries of this year's Toronto Trade Fair were announced at a presentation dinner at the Toronto Workers Club. $73,000 was raised by this year's fair, and together with funds from last year, more than $23,000 was donated to the Toronto Community Health Centre for the purchase of a minibus. About $49,000 was also set aside for other community services. The committee also sought approval for the three children's clubs, Apex, Rotary and Lions, to pursue its most ambitious project so far. The committee wants to set aside $30,000 from this year's funds to develop a tourist lookout at Mount Waring. The work will be organised as a CDP project, thereby attracting a further $120,000. Coupled with this, the committee intends to purchase the old Catholic Church at Toronto to be used as a SIS centre and the West Lake Forest Tourist Information Office. President of the Toronto Trade Fair Committee, Vic Lewis.
With the trade fair as it was originally or thought up anyway, there was a need to build the YMCA, and that in fact took some 3 years to get the funds. And what we're trying to do is in fact bring that type of concept back. We're hoping that with 2 good trade fairs we'll be able to fund these 2 projects.
So you're saying people shouldn't be scared of long-term projects?
We certainly don't believe so. In fact, it gives the club members, which are the driving force behind this whole exercise, something to work towards.
This is the third incidence of beaching along the coast in the past 9 months, but unlike the other occurrences, large numbers of the false killer whales are involved. Since they were first sighted yesterday morning, people have fought to save the whales. First on the scene were volunteers who kept them covered with water until National Parks and Wildlife Rangers arrived. Ranger Steve Phillips says the cause of the beachings is not known.
It could be that there's an injured animal amongst them and it has beached itself, and in turn the remainder of the pod have beached themselves to give assistance. It could be that their sonar was confused by a sandbar offshore, we just don't know.
Early rescue attempts were hampered by whales returning to the shore after they'd been dragged to deeper waters. Workers resorted to transporting them across the headland, although at least 4 died from exhaustion. Last night, workers also made use of the high tide.
The activities of the Newcastle Folk Club are heavily tied to the Tech College campus at Tighes Hill. It was here that the recent successful folk festival was held, and in this low-ceilinged room in the Clegg building, known as the Dungeon, the club holds its regular Sunday night performances. It's the low ceiling, along with the lack of adjacent toilets and fire exits, which authorities object to. The regional director of TAFE, Gordon Gilroy, informed the club that it must find alternative accommodation by the beginning of 1986. The club points out, however, that when it started in 1967, the Tech gave it the Dungeon as a temporary measure. Club member Neville Cunningham says it is therefore the responsibility of TAFE to find alternative accommodation.
You've been asked to find another venue. Can you afford to find another venue?
Well, we're not in a position to find another venue. We've searched all over the Tech College here ourselves, and we've looked in cleaners' cupboards and Christ knows what. And every time that we find a place, they say it's not suitable. But we see no reason why, here in the Tech College, they've provided sporting grounds for rugby, football. They've other grounds over here for touch football and soccer, and they've got tennis clubs. And these places require the upkeep, and their council blokes looking after it, maintenance and all the rest of it. And the Tech College spends, tens of thousands of dollars in the upkeep and the maintenance of these places. We say that we should be at least entitled to some kind of a, provision on campus themselves. I think that they've got a responsibility.
Newcastle's Association of Relatives and Friends of the Mentally Ill gathered in TPI House in Scott Street for the presentation of an award to Dr. Steve Robinson for his outstanding work in the field of the mentally ill. The Regional Director of Health, Dr. Owen James, opened the proceedings with a brief talk on the ongoing work of the RAFME, as it's called. Mental Health Services Dr. Brian Thwaites followed with similar words of encouragement to those whose lot it is to cope with a loved one suffering from mental illness. The special award, the Marjorie Johnston Award, named after one of the original RAFME members, was presented to Dr. Robinson by Mrs. Margaret Lukes, the President of the Association, New South Wales branch. Dr. Robinson, a psychiatrist at the Crisis Assessment and Treatment Team in Newcastle, has been working with the RAFME locally since its formation in the mid-70s. I asked him whether it was the patient, or in many cases the long-suffering family or relatives of the patient, who he tries to help most.
Both are very important because the family bear by far the greatest burden of care, and often they have poor understanding of illnesses such as schizophrenia, which is quite a complicated illness, so that assisting families to understand the illness is often a big start.
Would you be able to put into a few simple words what drives you on to become so involved with this type of patient?
The satisfaction that I see when an obviously mentally tormented person is relieved, and the relief that families obviously feel when they can see that the people that they love are feeling easier.
Basically, it's suggestion. It's not so much a matter of relaxation. Hypnosis is based on suggestion. It's an altered state of consciousness.
Mr. Key has been practicing in Newcastle for almost 40 years, and he's not always enjoyed a flourishing business. There was a time when there was a stigma attached to it, and patients kept their visits strictly confidential. Now it's being more widely accepted, although some mainstream medicos are still concerned about the quality of care.
Properly applied, there's, I think, a lot to be gained from hypnotherapy. The main concern, I guess, a lot of us have is that it be applied, to use your word, holistically, that there is an appreciation of the total person and their medical, individual, social context, and that hypnotherapy be not applied as a kind of gimmick.
Brenda Sheldon first came to see Mr. Key 13 years ago when she was engulfed in a deep depression. Since then, she's only seen him twice, but she retains the power of positive thinking.
Well, they're all positive suggestions, so obviously, yes, they do. You do. There's nothing there to object to. You want to feel good, everyone wants to feel good, so it's obviously a good idea.